Prichard Colón's name has returned to headlines this week, but not for a comeback story, for the news that the former Puerto Rican boxing prospect has passed away at 33, more than a decade after the fight that changed everything. His father, Prichard Colón, shared the news on Facebook, writing with quiet grief that he was informing people of his son's passing from this world, adding that Prichard was now somewhere better, and thanking everyone for years of love and prayers. It was a short message, but it carried the weight of 10 long years of caregiving, hope, and heartbreak, because Prichard's story had never truly ended in October of 2015. It had simply paused, suspended in a way few people ever have to endure. Back then he was undefeated, 16 wins without a single loss, a rising junior middleweight with speed, instinct, and the kind of presence that made people believe he was destined for something bigger. That October night in Fairfax, Virginia, everything changed during a fight against Terrel Williams. Cameras captured Williams landing illegal blows to the back of Colón's head, so-called rabbit punches in the 7th round, and Colón visibly struggled afterward. He was knocked down twice in the 9th round, and in a moment that would later feel almost unbearably cruel, his own corner mistakenly began removing his gloves, believing the fight was over, only to realize too late that it wasn't. He was disqualified, but by then the damage had already been done. Colón was rushed to the hospital where doctors operated to relieve pressure building on his brain. He fell into a coma that would last 221 days. When he finally emerged, he was left in a persistent vegetative state, cared for around the clock by his parents, who never stopped believing, never stopped hopping, and never stopped showing up for him, year after year, even as the spotlight faded and the world moved on. The devastating nature of his injury led boxing's governing bodies to act. In 2016, the WBC introduced what became known as the Prichard Colón Rule, a formal crackdown on rabbit punches designed to protect future fighters from suffering the same fate. It was one small, permanent mark his story left on the sport, even as his own fight continued in silence, far from any ring. Now 10 years later, that fight has ended, and the boxing world has responded with an outpouring of grief. The WBC called him an eternal champion, offering condolences to his parents and to what it described as the heroic people of Puerto Rico. The WBO echoed similar sentiments, calling his courage and resilience a testament that transcended the sport itself. But perhaps the most personal tribute came from an unexpected voice, a Puerto Rican superstar, Bad Bunny, who published an open letter in the newspaper El Nuevo Dia, signed with his birth name, Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio. In it, he revealed a connection to Colón that predated his own rise to global fame, explaining that back in 2014, right as he was recording his very first songs in his closet, he had also begun following the career of a young Puerto Rican boxing prospect who seemed to have everything: style, skill, ring intelligence, power, presence, and charisma. He wrote that he used to talk about this young fighter with the same passion he talked about his own music, introducing him to friends who hadn't yet heard his name. He admitted that he had a feeling, even back then, that Colón was going to be the next great one, the star Puerto Rican boxing had been waiting for. And then, in words that captured the tragedy at the heart of this story, he wrote that fate had robbed Colón of the chance to become everything he knew he could have been, but that they would remember him always as a champion of their land. As tributes continued to pour in from fans, fellow athletes, and public figures across Puerto Rico and beyond, attention naturally turned toward the family who had carried this burden in private for a decade. The father who pushed his son's wheelchair through the hardest years imaginable, the mother who stood beside them both, and the quiet, unwavering devotion that had defined their lives since that October night in 2015. Prichard Colón's own words, though brief, spoke volumes about what those years had truly meant, revealing that even in his son's final wish, there had been something simple and human, a longing to return home to Puerto Rico one last time, a wish that, despite everything the family tried, they were ultimately unable to fulfill. No official cause of death has been released, and the family has chosen, for now, to keep further details private, asking instead for prayers and continued support during what they've described as an immeasurable loss. What remains is a story that boxing fans and casual observers alike have found impossible to look away from, not because of controversy or scandal, but because of the quiet, decade-long devotion of a family who never gave up, and the unexpected voice of one of Puerto Rico's biggest stars, who made sure the world remembered exactly who Prichard Colón was before that fight, and everything he might have become.